Welcome to Momentum Mind. If you've ever felt stuck even though you want to change, this is for you. Not because you're lazy, and not because you're broken, but because your mind has been running on the same loop, and today we interrupt it. In this story, comfort is a cage, happiness is engineered, and one small question can crack an entire world open. Welcome to Momentum Mind. Put on your headphones, take a breath, and let's step into the story. Chapter 1. The Orchard of Perfect Smiles. The first thing you noticed was the smell, not flowers, not rain, not bread. Something cleaner than clean. A sweetness with no source, as if the air itself had been rinsed and sugared. It clung to the back of your throat the way a lullaby clings to a half-remembered dream. You stood at the edge of the orchard, where the ceiling arched high like the inside of a pearl. Light slid along the curved walls in slow waves, never harsh, never dim, always the same soothing brightness. Above, vents breathed out the scented air in soft pulses. Below, rows of glass cradles stretched into the distance, each one holding a sleeping child the size of a bundle, skin smooth as polished fruit. They didn't look like babies. Babies, in old stories, were messy and loud and strange. These were quiet. Their mouths were relaxed into tiny, peaceful shapes, as if they'd already learned the art of being pleased. A woman in a pale coat walked beside you. Her shoes made no sound on the floor. Everything here seemed designed to avoid sharpness, no corners, no sudden noises, no shadows that might make the mind wander into worry. Breathe easy, she said, watching your face with gentle precision. Your first time inside can feel big. Her voice had that practiced softness, like a pillow pressed against a bruise. You didn't answer right away. You were afraid that if you spoke, the sweetness in the air would slide into your words and make them less yours. You'd been assigned here. Not chosen. Assigned. The city called it placement, like a hand settling a tool into the right drawer. You had been a tool in other places, moving parcels, checking screens, guiding visitors through bright halls where the walls sang faintly. But this place, this orchard, felt like the beginning of everything. Like the city's womb, the woman led you between the rows. Each cradle had a thin band of light hovering above it, displaying symbols that shifted as you walked past. You couldn't read all of them, but you caught patterns, repeating shapes, tidy codes. Each sleeping child had a tag without paper, a label without ink. The labels floated, obedient and silent. Here, the woman said, stopping by a cradle near the aisle. Look closely. Inside, a child slept with its hands curled near its chest. The skin was pale, the hair a soft down. Its breathing was timed to a quiet rhythm that seemed to come from the cradle itself. A thin line ran from the child's ankle into the cradle's rim, carrying something invisible. What is it receiving? You asked before you could stop yourself. The woman's smile widened, not in surprise, but in approval, the way teachers smile when a student performs a trick they were trained to perform. Balance, she said. Calm. The foundation. Everything that could sharpen into discomfort is softened early. We don't wait for pain to form. We prevent it. You stared at the child's closed eyelids and tried to imagine a world without pain forming at all. It felt like trying to imagine a color you'd never seen. Farther down the aisle, something clicked. Not loud, but real. Your ears perked up as if recognizing a forbidden sound. The woman didn't react. Or if she did, she hid it under her calm. The orchard hums, she said, as if explaining away your attention. Machines do that. But it hadn't been a hum. It had been a click, like a latch. They kept walking. As you moved deeper into the rows, you began to notice differences. Some children looked almost identical, like reflections caught in different panes of glass. The curve of the nose, the shape of the ear, the slope of the chin, repeated. You slowed near a cluster of cradles where the repetition was too perfect to ignore. 5, then more, all sleeping with the same tiny mouth, the same soft brow. Are they siblings? You asked, even though the word tasted antique on your tongue. The woman's eyes gleamed with something like pride. They're a batch. Designed for harmony. When the city needs hands, we make hands. When the city needs minds, we make minds. When the city needs both, we make both. Disorder comes from chance. Chance is rude. You glanced at the labels hovering above the cradles and saw the same pattern repeating. A batch. The word made you picture loaves rising in ovens, identical buns lined up on trays, ready to be eaten. The thought should have been normal. The city loved neatness. But the orchard made the idea feel stranger. These were not buns. They were faces. They were futures. A door slid open in the distance with a sigh like someone exhaling. A group entered, visitors, judging by their bright sashes and their eager, polished expressions. Their laughter was light and synchronized, like birds trained to sing on cue. They moved in a little swarm, guided by another pale-coated attendant. The visitors pointed at cradles, leaned close, murmured compliments. The attendant spoke in a warm, confident tone, offering words that sounded rehearsed. You felt your stomach tighten. Not from fear, exactly. From something else. A sense that you were looking at something sacred and also something staged. Asu and the woman passed another section. The air changed. The sweetness remained, but beneath it was a sharper note, like cold metal. Your skin prickled as if the orchard had turned its gaze toward you. The cradles here were different. They were stacked in tall columns, like honeycomb cells. The sleeping children were smaller, their limbs thinner, their faces less refined. The labels above them glowed in a different color, a dimmer tone. Why are these ones like this? You asked. The woman's stride did not change. Different roles, she said. Different needs. The city is a body. Each part must match its function. You wouldn't put a delicate eye where a calloused foot belongs. Her words slid over you like oil, meant to make everything smooth. But the sight of the smaller faces did not become smooth inside your head. It stayed jagged. You couldn't stop thinking, they look less like fruit and more like seeds kept too long in a jar. You wanted to ask if they ever woke up wanting something that wasn't given. If they ever cried. But you knew the orchard didn't like that kind of question. The orchard was a place where questions were trimmed into shapes that could be stored. The woman paused at a wall that looked like blank glass. She touched a spot with her palm. The glass rippled, then opened into a narrow passage. This way, she said. The passage was dimmer, lit by thin lines along the floor. As you stepped in, the air lost some of its sweetness. You almost sighed in relief, but the relief came with unease. Like stepping out of a warm bath into a room where someone might be waiting. The hallway curved and led to another chamber. Here, there were no cradles. Instead, there were long tables, and on them, rows of helmets shaped like smooth shells. Wires dangled from their backs like roots. Above each helmet floated a small screen that displayed looping images, a smiling face, a hand at work, a crowd moving in perfect rhythm, a pair of lovers pressing their mouths together in an easy, practiced way. The sound in this chamber was different. Not silence. Not hum. A whispering, layered and constant, like wind pushing through reeds. You leaned closer and realized it wasn't one voice. It was many, overlapping, repeating phrases. Not loud enough to grasp fully, but loud enough to sink into the bones. What is this? You asked, throat dry. The woman's smile returned, tender and assured. This is the library, she said. But not the old kind. Not pages that let the mind wander. This is a library that reads you. It writes you. She picked up a helmet and held it gently, like a priest lifting a sacred object. When they sleep, we teach them. We give them what the city needs them to believe. We give them contentment. We give them direction. We give them words to think with. You watched the helmets. They looked harmless. Like toys. Like something a child might wear while playing pretend, but the whispering made your neck hairs lift. Do they ever resist? You asked, and hated how small your voice sounded in the chamber. The woman looked at you with calm amusement, as if you'd asked whether the ceiling ever forgot to stay up. Why would they? She said. Resistance is discomfort. Discomfort is an error. We correct errors before they appear. She set the helmet down. The whispering continued, steady and patient, like water wearing down stone. Then you noticed something at the far end of the room, a door that didn't match the others. It was darker, framed in metal that looked older, less polished. Above it, no sign glowed. No soft label floated. The woman turned as if to block your view, but not quickly enough. Your eyes had already latched onto it the way a tongue finds a sore tooth. "What's in there?" you asked. Her smile held, but it tightened slightly, like a ribbon pulled too hard. "Storage," she said. "Storage of what?" you pressed, surprised by your own insistence. For a moment, the whispering seemed to grow clearer, as if the room itself leaned in to listen. The woman's gaze slid to the dark door and back to you. "Old equipment," she said, gentle as ever. "Things that aren't used anymore." You didn't believe her. You didn't know why you didn't believe her. You just didn't. The door looked like a secret that had been walled off and forgotten, and the orchard did not forget. The orchard did not allow rough edges to remain. The visitor's laughter drifted faintly from somewhere beyond, a bright sound in a place that suddenly felt heavy. The woman touched your elbow. Her fingers were cool, firm, guiding. "Come," she said. "Your placement supervisor will want to meet you. There's more to see." As she led you away, you looked back once more. The dark door did not move. It did not glow. It did not whisper, but as you turned, you caught it, a tiny glint at the seam, like the faintest sliver of light slipping out from within, as if something inside was awake and watching through the crack. And behind you, in the chamber of helmets, one of the whispering loops changed. The phrase rose above the rest for just a breath, clear enough to understand, spoken in a voice that sounded nothing like the soothing voices of the city. It sounded like someone trying to remember their own name. Chapter 2, The Man Who Tuned the Air. Outside the orchard, the city greeted you like a practiced embrace. The corridor that carried you from the cradles and helmets into the public halls was lined with walls that shimmered faintly, as if they had been brushed with pearl dust. The air shifted back into its familiar sweetness, and with it came the gentle pressure you'd grown used to since childhood, the sense that every breath belonged not only to you, but to the place itself. People flowed past in smooth streams, never colliding, never stopping too suddenly. Their faces carried the same easy calm, the same soft brightness in the eyes, like lamps made to glow but not to flicker. Their clothes were clean, colored in pleasing shades, cut to flatter without ever daring to become strange. Even their laughter sounded designed, a sound that filled space without taking it over. You kept walking beside the woman in the pale coat, but your mind stayed behind with that dark door. The seam of light. The single phrase that had climbed out of the whispering loops and landed in your bones like a pebble. She guided you into a lift that didn't jolt or sway. It simply began moving, so smoothly you only knew it by the shift in your stomach. The walls of the lift displayed a slow-moving scene of sky and drifting birds, birds you had never seen in real life, birds that existed only as symbols of softness. You watched them glide in circles, trapped in endless gentle motion. When the lift opened, the hall outside was different. The light here was warmer. The air smelled less like sugar and more like polished wood. The floor had a faint spring to it, as if it were made to forgive every footstep. Along the walls were panels of art that changed as you passed, faces smiling, hands holding hands, bodies dancing in patterns. The city's favorite story, told over and over with different colors. At the end of the hall stood a door with your name shimmering above it in clean letters. You felt a small twist in your chest. Names were strange things. The city used them, yes, but more like labels on shelves than like secrets held close. Still, seeing your own name hovering there made you feel briefly solid, as if you had edges. The woman pressed her palm to the door. It opened without a sound. Inside was an office that didn't look like an office. It looked like a lounge designed to make you forget you were being measured. Soft chairs. A low table with cups that steamed faintly. A window that showed the city below, streets like ribbons, gardens like carefully brushed green paint. Far off, towers rose with gentle curves, their surfaces catching the light as if they were made of skin. A man stood by the window. His back was to you. He was tall, with shoulders that suggested strength without hardness. His hair was neatly cut but not as perfectly as most. There was something slightly off about him, like a note that almost matched the chord but not quite. He turned, and his face settled into a smile that was almost the same as everyone else's. "Almost welcome," he said. His voice was warm, but it carried a faint rasp, as if it had learned to speak in rooms where the air wasn't so carefully tuned. "I'm Marrow." You blinked. The name sounded like something from an old story, something that belonged inside bones. The woman in the pale coat stepped back, her role completed. Placement supervisor Marrow, she said, and then she was gone, slipping out of the room as if she'd never been there. Marrow gestured to one of the chairs. Sit. You've been through the orchard. It can make the mind feel full. You sat slowly. The chair cradled you the way the cradles had cradled the sleeping children, supportive, unquestioning. Marrow poured something into a cup and slid it toward you. The liquid was clear with a faint shimmer, like water that had learned a trick. Drink, he said. It will settle your nerves. You stared at the cup. Your hand hovered near it. Part of you wanted to obey instantly, to let the city's gentle solutions pour down your throat and wash away the sharpness that had begun to form. Another part of you, small, stubborn, newly awake, wondered what your nerves might be trying to tell you. Marrow watched you with mild interest. Not impatience. Not anger. Interest, like a person watching an animal behave unexpectedly. You don't have to, he said softly. But you may find it easier to listen if you do. That word, listen, caught. Most people in the city didn't talk about listening. They talked about enjoying, participating, belonging. Listening implied something hidden beneath the surface, something that might not want to be heard. You wrapped your fingers around the cup. It was warm. Comforting. You took a sip. The shimmer slid over your tongue like silk. Heat unfurled in your chest. The tightness in your stomach loosened a little, not fully, but enough that you could breathe deeper. Marrow leaned against the window frame. Beyond him, the city gleamed. You've been placed into systems harmony, he said. A good placement. Important work. You'll help maintain the loops. Your throat tightened again. The loops, you repeated. He nodded, as if you'd spoken the right word at the right time. The whispers. The images. The soft reminders. The city's lullaby. Without them, the mind wanders. And wandering minds, he tilted his head, as if considering how best to phrase it. Wandering minds scrape against things. Against what? You asked. Marrow's smile deepened. This time it looked less practiced and more personal, like something he'd chosen. Against truth, he said gently. Against want. Against fear. Against the old sharp feelings that make people do rude things. Outside the window, a flock of drone birds swept past in perfect formation. Their wings didn't flap. They glided on a hum you could almost feel through the glass. The city is kind, Marrow continued. It doesn't punish people for having minds that could hurt. It simply prevents the hurt from forming. His words echoed the pale-coated woman's words, but in his mouth they sounded different. More intimate. Less like a script. You shifted in the chair. I heard something in the library, you said, surprising yourself again. A phrase. It didn't sound like the loops. For the first time, Marrow's eyes sharpened. Not with anger. With a tension that felt like a hand closing around your wrist. What did it say? He asked. You hesitated. The phrase had already begun to blur in your memory, as if the drink had smoothed it. But you held on to what you could. It sounded like someone trying to remember who they were, you said. Marrow's fingers tapped the window frame once. A small sound. A real sound. The kind of sound you'd noticed in the orchard, the click like a latch. Interesting, he murmured. He looked away from you and out at the city, as if checking whether the towers were still where they were supposed to be. You followed his gaze. Down below, people moved like threads in a woven cloth. Nothing snagged. Nothing broke. Do you ever hear things you're not supposed to hear? You asked. Marrow turned back. His smile returned, but now it was carefully placed again, like a mask adjusted in a mirror. People aren't supposed to think in terms of supposed, he said. They're supposed to feel good. The way he said it made you wonder if he was quoting something. Or mocking it. He pushed away from the window and walked to a wall panel. His palm hovered near it, and the panel lit up with symbols that rearranged themselves quickly, like insects skittering into new shapes. He wasn't looking at you now. He was looking at the symbols with a kind of affection, like a musician looking at notes. You'll learn how to tune the air, he said. How to keep the phrases gentle. How to keep the images bright. How to keep the city asleep without ever calling it sleep. The last part sent a chill through you, even as the drink warmed your chest. Marrow glanced over his shoulder. You're quiet, he noted. Most new placements chatter. They fill space with gratitude. I don't know what to say, you admitted. He nodded, as if this was the most honest thing you could have offered. Then don't fill space, he said. Listen. He stepped closer to you. Close enough that you could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, lines that suggested he'd squinted at something too bright, or something too dark. Tell me, he said softly, when you stood in the orchard, did you feel proud? You frowned. The question felt like a hook. I don't know. You were meant to, he said, voice gentle. The orchard is designed to make pride bloom. Pride is a comfortable leash. It keeps the heart close to the city. And if pride doesn't bloom, you asked. Marrow's gaze held yours. Then something else might, he said. Your pulse quickened. Like what? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked back to the table and picked up another cup, turning it slowly between his fingers. Curiosity, he said at last, almost whispering the word as if it were dangerous. Curiosity is a seed that doesn't ask permission. You swallowed. The sweetness in the air suddenly felt heavier, like syrup filling the room. Marrow set the cup down and leaned closer, lowering his voice. There are doors in the city that aren't supposed to be noticed, he said. Doors without labels. Doors that don't glow. Your skin prickled. The dark door in the library flashed in your mind. I saw one, you said. Marrow's eyes flicked toward the ceiling, toward the corners where the air vents breathed their sugared breath. Then back to you. Did you? He murmured, and now the words sounded like both a question and a warning. You nodded slowly. Marrow's expression softened into something almost sad. Then you've already begun, he said. Begun what? You asked, but your voice came out thin. He straightened, and the sadness vanished behind that careful smile again. Your work, he said brightly, louder now, as if he wanted the room itself to hear. You'll start tomorrow. You'll be trained on the tuning boards. You'll learn to keep the loops clean and pleasant. You'll do well. The shift in his tone was so sudden it made your head spin. It was like watching a curtain drop in the middle of a scene. He moved to the door and placed his hand on the panel beside it. The letters of your name shimmered faintly again, as if reassured. One more thing, Marrow said, still in that brighter voice. There's a small tradition in systems harmony. A welcoming gift. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a thin band, something like a bracelet, made of a smooth material that caught the light. At its center was a tiny stone that wasn't quite a stone. It looked like a dark bead, glossy and deep, with a faint pulse inside it. He held it out to you. Wear this, he said. It will help the system recognize you. It will make your access easier. You took it. It was warm, as if it had been against someone's skin. When you slipped it onto your wrist, the bead pulsed once, slow and heavy, like a heartbeat you could feel through your bones. For a moment, the room seemed to hush. Even the sweet air felt like it paused. Marrow watched your face. There, he said softly. Now you belong. You looked down at the band. The bead's glossy surface reflected your eyes, but the reflection looked slightly delayed, as if it were thinking before it copied you. A faint sound came from the wall panel, another click, subtle but undeniable. Marrow's attention flicked toward it. He smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. Go rest, he said. The city will cradle you. You stood, band heavy on your wrist. As you stepped into the hall, the door sliding shut behind you, the sweetness of the air wrapped around your head like cotton, but beneath it, barely audible, you caught something else. Not a whispering loop. A new sound, thin as a thread, slipping into your ears from nowhere at all, your name, spoken in a voice you didn't recognize, as if the bracelet had learned it before you did. Chapter 3. The room that listened back. Your assigned living space waited for you as if it had been expecting your footsteps all day. The door recognized the band on your wrist before you even raised your hand. It slid aside with a breathy sigh, and warm air rolled out, scented with something faintly creamy and familiar, like comfort made into smell. The lights inside brightened gradually, never snapping on, never startling. Even the temperature seemed to settle around your skin like a shawl. The room was simple, but not bare. A bed that looked softer than anything had a right to be. Walls that could become any color you asked for. A small table with a bowl of fruit that looked too perfect to be real. A screen set into the wall that played slow-moving scenes of gentle water and drifting clouds. Everything designed to keep the mind floating, never sinking. You stepped in, and the door closed behind you with a quiet finality. For a few breaths, you stood still, listening. The city always had a sound beneath its silence, a low, soothing pulse, like a giant heart beating somewhere deep in the walls. Usually it lulled you. Tonight it felt like a hand resting on the back of your neck. You lifted your wrist and studied the band. In the room's soft light, the dark bead looked deeper than before, almost like a drop of ink suspended in glass. It pulsed once, then again, slow and patient. You moved closer to the wall screen. The scene shifted as you approached, not because you touched it, but because it seemed to sense you. The clouds became a little brighter. The water grew a little calmer. The thought rose in you, sharp as a needle. It's watching. You turned away from the screen and walked to the table. You picked up a piece of fruit. It was heavy and cool, its skin flawless. You brought it to your nose. It smelled like sweetness and nothing else. No earth. No bite of wildness. Just sweetness, clean and polite. You set it down without tasting it. The room felt suddenly too smooth, like a surface that wouldn't let your fingers find purchase. You wanted something rough, something real enough to scrape. You crossed to the bed and sat. The mattress adjusted under you, shaping itself to your body as if eager to please. The comfort was so complete it made you uneasy. You remembered the cradles in the orchard, the way they held the sleeping children with the same unquestioning support. Don't think like that, a familiar part of your mind whispered. Thinking like that leads nowhere pleasant. But another part of you, small, stubborn, answered back. Where does pleasant lead, if it's always chosen for you? You lay down, still wearing the band. The bead pressed lightly against the inside of your wrist. You could feel its warmth like a tiny animal curled there, alive in its own quiet way. The ceiling above the bed shifted into a night scene without you asking. Soft darkness spread, filled with gentle stars that twinkled in a pattern too perfect to be random. A moon drifted across the ceiling in a slow loop. It was beautiful, and it felt like a story told by someone who didn't understand why real night was frightening. Your eyes stayed open. You listened. At first, all you heard was the room's steady breath, the faint whisper of vents, the distant hum of the city's systems, the soft creak of materials settling into their intended shapes. Then, beneath it, you noticed something else, so faint you might have imagined it if you weren't already sharpened by the day. A whisper, not the layered, looping whisper from the library, but something smaller and closer, like a voice trying not to wake the house. You held your breath, and the whisper grew clearer. Belong. The word slid through the air like a finger tracing along your spine. You sat up, heart thumping. Who's there? You asked. The room did not answer. The ceiling stars continued their gentle twinkling. The moon kept drifting. The wall screen continued its slow water scene. Even though you weren't looking at it, you swung your feet to the floor. The floor warmed under your soles, welcoming you. The politeness of it made your skin crawl. You walked toward the door and pressed your palm to the panel. Nothing happened. You tried again. The door stayed shut, as if it had decided you needed more rest than you did. A pulse throbbed from the band. Slow. Heavy. You looked down. The bead's glossy surface seemed darker now, as if it had swallowed the room's light. Open, you said, feeling foolish. The door did not open. Your throat tightened. You pressed harder, then tapped, then flattened both palms against the panel. Still nothing. The city never trapped people. The city didn't need cages. It had comfort. It had sweetness. It had soft loops and pleasant images. It had bands that made access easier. The thought landed with a sick weight. You stepped back from the door, staring at it as if it might blink. The whisper returned, closer now, as if it had moved from the vents into the room itself. Rest. You spun toward the bed, then toward the wall screen, then toward the ceiling. The voice didn't have a direction. It was everywhere and nowhere, the way the city's lullaby was everywhere and nowhere. But this voice wasn't soothing. It was trying too hard to be soothing, and that made it terrifying, like a stranger smiling at you with borrowed kindness. You grabbed the band with your other hand and tried to pull it off. It didn't budge. You tugged harder, fingers digging into your skin. The band seemed to tighten slightly, not painfully, just enough to remind you it was the one holding you now. Panic flared, hot and bright. You yanked again, twisting your wrist, trying to force it over your hand. The bead pulsed faster. A thin, sharp sensation flickered up your arm, like a warning sting. You froze, breathing hard. The room's air seemed to thicken, the sweetness turning cloying, as if the space was trying to smother your panic with gentleness. You stumbled back to the bed and sat, clutching your wrist. The whisper softened, becoming almost tender again. Good. Your stomach turned. You wanted to scream, but you knew the city didn't like screams. Screams were jagged. Screams made people turn their heads, made the weave of the crowd snag, and you didn't even know if anyone could hear you. The room felt sealed, padded, wrapped in layers of polite silence. You forced yourself to breathe slowly, the way you'd been taught in school rooms with soft lighting and happy images on the walls. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Let the body settle. Let the mind float. It worked, a little. Enough to think, if the door won't open, maybe there's another way out. You stood again, moving carefully, as if sudden motion might trigger something. You scanned the room. No windows you could open. No visible vents big enough to crawl through. No obvious panels. Then you remembered the orchard's dark door. The unlabeled one. The one that didn't glow. Not everything is labeled, Marrow had said. Curiosity is a seed that doesn't ask permission. You crossed to the wall beside the screen. The surface looked seamless, but when you ran your fingers along it, you felt a faint difference, a subtle shift in temperature, like a hidden seam. You pressed there. Nothing. You pressed again, harder, and the wall gave a tiny click. Your breath caught. The sound was real. Not the soft sighs of polite doors, but a click like a latch. The same kind you'd heard near the orchard. You pressed once more, and a narrow panel slid aside. Behind it was darkness, not the gentle night darkness of the ceiling stars, but true darkness, thick and swallowing. It smelled different too, less sweet, more like dust and metal and something old. The narrow opening led into a service passage, barely wide enough for you to slip through. Thin lines of dim light ran along its floor, not warm, not welcoming, just functional. Your heart hammered. You glanced back at the room. The bed waited, soft and patient. The fruit bowl gleamed. The wall screen's water rippled gently, as if urging you to return to floating. The whisper rose again, urgent now, no longer pretending to be calm. Stay. Your skin prickled. The band pulsed faster, almost vibrating. You didn't know if the passage was allowed. You didn't know if it was watched. You didn't know what lay inside the old-smelling dark, but you knew one thing with sudden, fierce clarity. If you stayed, you would forget why you'd wanted to leave. You slipped into the opening. The panel slid shut behind you with a soft snick, cutting off the room's sweetness like a curtain falling. The air in the passage was cooler, thinner. It tasted like nothing, and that nothing felt like freedom. You took a step forward. The dim floor lights glowed under your feet, guiding you deeper. The walls were closer here, rougher, not designed for comfort. Your shoulder brushed against one, and you felt the scrape of real texture. A shiver ran through you, not fear alone, but something like relief. You walked, following the faint lights as the passage curved. The city's distant hum became louder here, less softened, more mechanical. You could hear the true body of the city, pumps, fans, the steady grind of systems that never rested. Then the passage opened into a small chamber filled with cables and metal ribs, like the inside of a giant animal. Screens blinked with symbols. Pipes ran along the ceiling like veins. In the center of the chamber was a terminal, an old-looking console with a surface worn smooth by hands. It didn't glow politely. It glared, stark and direct, and sitting hunched over it was a person, not in a bright sash. Not in a pale coat. Their clothes were plain and dark, their hair messy, their posture tense, as if they'd learned to make themselves small in a world that preferred smooth, rounded shapes. They turned at the sound of your footsteps. Their eyes were wide, alert, and unlike the soft, pleased eyes of the city. These eyes were sharp with something raw and alive. You opened your mouth, but before you could speak, the stranger lifted a finger to their lips, warning you into silence. Then they pointed at your wrist. At the band, and in the dim chamber, you saw it clearly for the first time, a tiny thread of light extending from the bead, stretching into the wall like a leash, pulsing in time with your heartbeat. Chapter 4, The Unsmiling Stranger. The stranger didn't speak. Not yet. They stayed crouched by the console, one hand hovering near a cluster of switches, the other still raised in that quiet command for silence. In the dim light their face looked carved out of tension, cheeks hollowed by vigilance, lips pressed into a line that refused to curl into the city's easy smile. Your own breath sounded too loud in the little chamber. Every inhale felt like it might set off alarms you couldn't see. The city's machinery throbbed around you, louder here, not masked by sweetness. It was the sound of something enormous being kept alive by force. The stranger's eyes flicked to the thread of light on your wrist, then to your face, then to the walls. They were tracking more than you could. You lifted your wrist slowly, almost afraid to look again. The bead pulsed, and the thin filament of light stretched from it into a seam between metal panels. It didn't look like a cable. It looked like a line drawn by a living thing, a vein made of pure signal. A leash, your mind supplied, and the thought made your throat tighten. The stranger rose in one smooth movement and crossed the chamber with careful steps. They moved like someone trained to avoid creaking floors, someone who'd learned the smallest sounds could be punished. Up close, you could see faint scars on their hands, thin lines, old and pale, not the kind people in the city usually carried. In the city, damage was soothed before it could become a mark. They stopped an arm's length away and tilted their head toward your wrist. Their eyebrows lifted in a question. I can't take it off, you whispered, the words slipping out before you could stop them. The stranger's mouth tightened further, but their eyes softened, just slightly, as if they'd expected that answer. They glanced behind you at the passage you'd come through, then back to the console. Their hand darted out and grasped your wrist, not roughly, but with urgency. Their fingers were warm, calloused. They turned your wrist, examining the band's seam, the way it hugged your skin. The bead pulsed again, and you felt a faint sting climb your arm, like the band objected to being handled. The stranger flinched, not from pain, but from recognition. Then they released you and stepped back. They leaned toward the console and tapped a sequence on the worn keys. The screen brightened with harsh white symbols that didn't drift or soften. They sat there like teeth. The stranger glanced over their shoulder at you and spoke at last, in a voice low and quick, like speech kept hidden for too long. You shouldn't be here, they said. You almost laughed, but it came out as a shaky breath. I know. The stranger's eyes narrowed. How did you find this access? A seam in my room, you said. A panel. Their gaze sharpened at that, as if your answer had confirmed something they'd suspected. They turned back to the console, typing again, faster now. You watched their hands move. They were skilled, not just with machines but with caution. They paused often, listening, head tilted, as if the city might whisper warnings through the pipes. I heard a voice, you said, then hated how desperate you sounded. In my room. Not the loops. It said things. And the door wouldn't open. The stranger's shoulders tightened. The room listened back. They murmured, almost to themselves, then looked at you again. They gave you a band on your first day? Yes, you said. Marrow. He said it was for access. At the name, the stranger's jaw clenched. A flash of something, anger, fear, both, crossed their face like a shadow. They spat the name softly, as if it tasted bitter. Of course he did. You took a cautious step closer. Who are you? The stranger hesitated. The city had trained people not to hesitate over names. Names were easy labels, handed out like cups. But this hesitation felt different. Like the stranger knew that names, real names, were dangerous. Call me Ash, they said at last, eyes fixed on you, searching for something. Just for now. Ash. The sound was rough and simple. Not a polished word. A word that came from fire after it had done its work. You began. Ash cut you off with a sharp look toward your wrist. Not allowed, they said. Not here. You swallowed. The band pulsed slowly, as if pleased by Ash's caution. Ash turned back to the console and flipped a small switch. A low tone sounded, barely audible, and the filament of light from your bead flickered. You felt a tug in your chest, like a hook being tested. You gasped softly. Ash's eyes darted to your face. Does it hurt? No, you whispered. It feels like Like something is pulling on me from inside. Ash nodded grimly. It's not just access. It's a tether. It tells them where you are. It listens through you. It can push things into you. Push what? You asked, though you already feared the answer. Ash's gaze slid to the pipes overhead, to the vents. Sleep, they said. Comfort. Forgetting. Sometimes, panic, if they need you to run back where they want you. Your stomach rolled. You remembered the sudden thickness of the air in your room, the way the sweetness had felt like cotton pressed over your face. You mean the city can control what I feel? You whispered. Ash's eyes met yours, hard and honest. The city's whole job is to make sure you don't have feelings that don't fit. A cold silence fell between you, filled only by the distant throb of machines. Ash turned back to the console and typed again. The symbols on the screen rearranged, forming a map-like lattice of lines. One bright point pulsed on it, matching the rhythm of your wrist. Ash pointed at the pulsing point. That's you. You stared. Seeing yourself reduced to a dot made your skin crawl. The city loved turning living things into simple shapes. Ash's finger slid along the lines to another cluster of points. Most were dim, steady, calm. A few flickered. One glowed brighter than the rest, not steady but irregular, like a heartbeat that couldn't find a rhythm. Ash's face tightened. That's not good, they murmured. What is it? You asked. Ash didn't answer right away. They leaned closer to the screen, eyes scanning. Then they swore under their breath, a word you'd only ever heard in old recordings, spoken by actors pretending to be wild. Hearing it in real life made your pulse jump. They're sweeping, Ash said. Sweeping? You echoed. Ash looked at you sharply. Looking for you, they said. Your band told them you left your room. The system doesn't like gaps. It will flood nearby zones, check passages, lock doors, tighten air. As if the city could hear, the machinery's throb shifted slightly, a subtle change in pitch that made your teeth ache. Ash grabbed your wrist again, but this time with purpose. They pulled you toward the console and angled your arm under a small scanner, a ring of metal embedded in the tabletop. Hold still, Ash whispered. The ring lit faintly, and the bead pulsed hard, fast, like it was trying to shout. You felt heat flare under your skin. Your vision blurred for a heartbeat, and you nearly swayed. Ash's face went pale, but they didn't let go. Their other hand flew over the console keys, tapping a rapid pattern. Then, suddenly, the heat eased. The bead's pulse slowed, confused. Ash exhaled sharply. I muffled it, they said. Not cut. Just wrapped. Wrapped in what? You asked, voice shaking. Ash's eyes flicked to the dark seams between panels. Noise, they said. The city hates noise. Not sound. Noise. Unpredictable signal. It can't smooth it. A faint tremor ran through the chamber, like the building had shivered. Somewhere beyond the walls, something heavy shifted. Ash's head snapped up. They listened, eyes wide. You listened too, straining. At first you heard only the machines. Then, faintly, through the pipes, you heard something else, a rhythmic hiss, like a deep breath being taken in unison across a massive space. The air is changing, you realized. The city was tightening the world. Ash grabbed your hand and pulled you toward the far side of the chamber. There, behind a cluster of thick cables, was another narrow opening, a hatch set low in the wall. Ash knelt and pressed their palm to it. The hatch didn't open politely. It resisted for a moment, then gave with a stubborn scrape, like it hadn't been used in a long time. A gust of colder air puffed out, smelling of damp stone and rust. Ash looked back at you. In the dim chamber light, their face was fierce, urgent. If you go back now, Ash whispered, you'll forget this. You'll wake up in your bed smiling, and you'll think you dreamed me. Your throat tightened. And if I don't go back? Ash's eyes held yours. Then you'll start seeing the seams everywhere, they said. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. Another tremor ran through the walls. The hiss in the pipes grew louder, like a breath turning into a sigh. Ash shoved the hatch wider. Beyond it, you saw a narrow crawlspace slanting downward, lit only by occasional red indicator lights that blinked like sleepy eyes. Ash squeezed your hand once, quick and grounding. Move, they whispered. You crouched and began to climb through. The band on your wrist pulsed again, but muffled, as if smothered under layers of static. The filament of light trembled, searching for a clean path to report you. Behind you, Ash slid in after you and pulled the hatch toward closed, almost closed, leaving a thin crack. Through that crack, you saw the chamber one last time, the console's harsh screen, the cables like veins, the dim floor lights, and then you saw something else. A soft glow bloomed at the entrance of the chamber, the gentle, welcoming light of a normal door sliding open. Footsteps entered, soundless on the functional floor. A voice, smooth as sugared air, drifted in. Hello? Ash's breath stopped beside you. The hatch scraped shut, and darkness swallowed the chamber's light, leaving you in the crawlspace with Ash's warm, tense presence and the faint pulse of the band like a frightened heart. In the black ahead, something moved, something not made of metal or pipe, scraping slowly toward you through the narrow passage as if it had been waiting for the hatch to open. Chapter 5, The Crawlspace with Teeth. The darkness ahead was not empty. You couldn't see more than a hand's length in front of your face, but you could feel the shape of the passage the way you feel a room when the lights go out, by the way the air presses, by the way sound behaves. The crawlspace slanted down and narrowed, its walls damp and close. Somewhere ahead, something scraped again, slow and deliberate, as if it had claws, or tools, testing the ground. Ash's hand found your shoulder, gripping firmly enough to steady you without pushing. Their breath was shallow by your ear. Don't speak, Ash mouthed, their lips close to your hair. You didn't need the words. The band on your wrist pulsed like it was trying to translate panic into signal. Another scrape, then a faint click-click, not loud, but purposeful, like joints folding, like something adjusting itself to fit the tunnel. You swallowed, and the sound of it seemed enormous. You froze, listening for a reaction. The thing ahead paused, your skin tightened over your bones. For a moment, you were sure it had heard you, sure it would come gliding toward you with patient certainty. But after a long, tense breath, it scraped again, this time farther away, as if it had shifted to the side, retreating into a notch or side channel you couldn't see. Ash tugged your sleeve. You started crawling. The floor was rough, gritty with dust and tiny metal shavings that stuck to your palms. Your knee slid over patches of dampness, cold enough to make you flinch. The city above was all softness and forgiveness. Down here, nothing forgave. Every movement made your body aware of itself, skin, bone, breath. You tried to keep your breathing quiet, but fear made you greedy for air. The band pulsed faster, and with each pulse you imagined the filament of light trembling through the walls, trying to find a clean route out, trying to call home. Ash crawled close behind you, matching your pace. Their presence was both comfort and reminder. You weren't alone, but you were also not supposed to be together. The tunnel bent, and the air changed. It grew colder, and the smell of damp stone sharpened into something metallic, like old blood. You passed a blinking red light embedded in the wall. It flickered slowly, as if half asleep, and painted your hands a dull crimson when you crawled past it. Ahead, the scraping returned, closer. Your body tensed so hard your muscles trembled. You stopped instinctively, but Ash's fingers pinched your ankle gently, urging you forward. The scraping became a soft dragging, like something smooth being pulled along stone. Then, faintly, you heard a sound that made your stomach drop, a soft, gentle chime, not harsh, not alarming. A friendly chime. The kind the city used to announce comfort, to signal that something helpful was nearby. Ash's hand tightened on your ankle. They sent a cleaner, Ash whispered so softly the words barely existed. One of the quiet ones. Cleaner. You pictured pale-coated attendants and polished floors. But Ash's tone turned the word into something else, something predatory. You crawled faster. The tunnel narrowed, forcing your shoulders to scrape. Your breath came in tight puffs. The band pulsed, and you felt a faint pressure behind your eyes, like drowsiness being nudged into place. No, you thought fiercely. Not now. You bit the inside of your cheek hard enough to taste copper. Pain, sharp and real, cut through the fog trying to gather in your skull. You clung to that sting like a rope. The chime sounded again, closer now, and with it came a faint perfume, sweet and clean, the same scent as the orchard's air, pushed into the crawlspace like a hunting dog's breath. Your panic spiked. Ash hissed a warning, then tapped your wrist, right on the bead. The bead pulsed, confused, as if the tap had interrupted its rhythm. Ahead, the tunnel opened slightly into a low pocket where the ceiling rose enough for you to crouch. Ash nudged you into it. You pressed yourself into the shadow, heart pounding. Ash slid in behind you, their body close, one arm braced against the wall, the other hovering near your wrist as if ready to smother the bead's pulse by force. You waited. The chime grew louder, then stopped right outside the pocket. The sweet scent thickened. It felt like syrup poured into your lungs. A shape moved in the tunnel beyond, still mostly hidden by darkness, but you caught glimpses in the red blink light, a smooth, rounded surface like pale ceramic, thin limbs that folded and unfolded with insect patience, a head that was not a head, just a curved dome with a small glowing slit where eyes might be. It slid forward soundlessly, except for that soft drag. A city device. Polite. Helpful. Ash didn't move. You didn't breathe. The device paused. Its glowing slit brightened, scanning. A faint hum rose from it, like a cat purring in a room full of sleeping birds. Your band pulsed once, loud in your nerves, even if it made no sound. The device's slit narrowed. Ash's fingers clamped over the bead, the pulse muffled, and you felt a jolt of heat under Ash's palm. Ash winced, but didn't let go. The device hummed again, softer, as if uncertain. Then it released a slow, soothing exhale of perfumed air. The sweetness flooded deeper, and your eyelids fluttered despite your will. You clenched your jaw. You bit your cheek again. Pain flared, anchoring you. The device shifted closer. Its smooth dome brushed the edge of the pocket. A thin limb extended, not clawed but tipped with a small pad that glowed faintly. The pad hovered in the air, tasting it, sampling it, reading tiny shifts you couldn't sense. Ash leaned toward your ear, lips barely moving. If it touches you, Ash breathed, it can reset you. Reset, the word made your stomach twist. You imagined your mind scrubbed like a floor, your questions wiped away, your memories smoothed into comfortable blankness. The glowing pad drifted closer. Your body trembled with the urge to bolt, but there was nowhere to bolt. The tunnel behind the device was blocked by its own smooth bulk. The tunnel ahead was unknown. The pad hovered a finger's width from your wrist. Then Ash moved, not a sudden lunge, but a precise, controlled strike. Ash's hand darted out and slapped the pad sideways, knocking it into the tunnel wall. The glow flickered. The device chimed, still friendly, still polite, but now with an edge of confusion. Ash grabbed your wrist and yanked you out of the pocket. You crawled forward past the device's dome, squeezing between it and the wall. The ceramic surface was cold against your shoulder. The glowing slit flared brighter, sweeping over your face. For a heartbeat, you felt seen in a way you had never felt seen before, not as a person, but as a problem. The band pulsed violently. The device's limb shot out again, faster now, and grazed your sleeve. A wave rolled over your mind, warm, heavy, inviting. Your thoughts slowed. The tunnel blurred. For a moment, the city's ceiling stars drifted behind your eyes and you tasted that silky drink again. Go back, a voice inside you urged, not yours, not Ash's. Rest. Float. You fought it, teeth clenched, and crawled harder, pulling yourself forward with raw panic. Ash followed close, breathing harshly now. Keep moving, Ash rasped. Don't let it finish. Behind you, the device chimed again. The friendliness in it now sounded like mockery. The tunnel bent sharply downward, and you slid more than crawled. Dust coated your hands. Your elbows hit stone. The pain was real, and you welcomed it like a slap. Then, suddenly, you tumbled out of the crawl space into a larger space and landed on your side. Cold air hit your face, air that smelled not of sweetness, but of wet earth. Your lungs gulped it greedily. Above you, the ceiling rose into darkness. The walls were not smooth panels, they were old stone, mottled and uneven, scarred by time and moisture. Ash dropped beside you, rolling, then scrambling upright with a wild glance back at the crawlspace opening. A faint glow appeared there, the device's slit, peering. Ash grabbed your arm and pulled you to your feet. Run, Ash whispered, voice sharp with urgency. You stumbled forward, feet slipping on damp stone. The space around you was a tunnel, wider than the crawl space, but still enclosed, still underground. Water dripped somewhere with steady insistence. The sound was so natural it felt shocking. Behind you, the device began to squeeze through the opening. It couldn't fit easily. its limbs folded and pressed. Its dome scraped stone with a faint screech, the first truly ugly sound you'd heard from a city machine. It didn't like rough places. Ash led you down the tunnel, moving fast and sure, as if they'd memorized every bend. You ran, breath tearing in your throat, the band on your wrist pulsed, but the filament of light seemed weaker here, as if the stone interfered, as if the city's signal had trouble passing through old, stubborn earth. Hope flared, small, bright. Then the tunnel opened into a chamber where the ceiling arched high, and in the center stood something that did not belong underground. A door, not a glowing city door, not a polite sliding panel. A heavy door made of dark metal and rivets, scarred and scratched. A wheel handle sat at its center like an eye. The air around it felt colder, as if it led somewhere the city didn't warm. Ash skidded to a stop in front of it and grabbed the wheel, straining. It didn't move. Ash cursed again, voice low and fierce, and tried harder. Muscles in their arms stood out like cords. You glanced back. Down the tunnel, the device's glow bobbed closer, squeezing through, scraping, chiming, still chiming, as if it believed it could soothe you into surrender. Ash's hand slipped on the wheel. It stuck, Ash hissed, panic flashing across their face for the first time. You grabbed the wheel too, your fingers cold against the metal. You pushed with Ash, twisting with all your strength. The wheel groaned. It turned a fraction. Behind you, the device chimed again, and the sweetness of its perfume began to creep into the chamber, faint but hungry. Ash's eyes met yours, wild and urgent. If we don't open it, Ash whispered, it will touch you again. The wheel turned another fraction, and the door shuddered as if something on the other side had leaned against it. Then, from beyond the door, came a sound that made you freeze. A human voice, not smooth, not polite, rough with age or exhaustion, and very awake. Who's out there? The voice called, suspicious and sharp, as if it had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Chapter 6. The door that shouldn't open. The voice on the other side didn't sound like anyone you'd ever heard in the city. It wasn't warm with practiced kindness. It wasn't coated in sweetness. It carried rough edges, like stone under fingernails. The words came out like they had weight, like they weren't meant to float. Ash's eyes widened, then narrowed with a quick calculation. The device behind you scraped closer, the friendly chime repeating in stubborn little pulses. The perfume sweetness thickened again, creeping along the floor and up your legs as if it had fingers. Ash leaned close to the door and spoke fast, low. Open, Ash said. Please. It's on us. Silence. Then the voice again, closer now, wary. Who taught you to say please? Ash flinched, not with embarrassment but with urgency. No time, Ash hissed. They tagged them. It's a cleaner. At the word cleaner, something shifted on the other side of the door. A scrape of metal. A breath. The wheel handle on your side trembled faintly, as if the mechanism had answered a touch from within. Back, the voice snapped. Ash jerked you away from the door by your sleeve. You stumbled 2 steps, heart hammering, and turned just in time to see the device's pale dome appear in the tunnel mouth. It slid forward, slit glowing brighter, limbs unfolding like patient knives. It chimed again, still that gentle, pleasant sound, now grotesque in the damp stone chamber. The thin limb extended, pad glowing. The door behind you clanked. The wheel spun a fraction on its own. Then the door cracked open, cold air punched into the chamber like a fist, carrying the smell of smoke and iron and something living that wasn't sanitized. The crack widened, and a figure filled it, broad, wrapped in dark layers, face half hidden by a hood. A hand shot out and grabbed Ash's collar, hauling Ash backward through the opening with startling strength. Ash vanished into the dark beyond. Your lungs seized. You lurched toward the door, but the hooded figure's other hand lashed out, catching your wrist, right on the band. Their grip was like a clamp. The bead pulsed violently. The figure's hand twitched. Ha, they muttered, as if the band's heat had bitten them. They really did it. The cleaner chimed, and the glowing pad reached again, almost delicate. The hooded figure yanked you backward hard. You stumbled through the crack into darkness, and the door slammed shut behind you with a booming finality that shook dust from the stone ceiling. For a heartbeat, there was only blackness and the sound of your own ragged breathing. Then a lantern flared to life. The light was not the city's smooth, even glow. It flickered. It cast shadows. It made the world feel deep and uncertain. The lantern hung from a hook on a wall of rough stone. The corridor you stood in was narrow, carved from rock, damp and cold. Water dripped somewhere steadily. The air tasted like smoke and old metal. Ash stood beside you, chest heaving, eyes wide. The hooded figure faced you both, lantern light catching the lines of a face weathered into sharp planes. Their eyes were pale and hard, like they'd stared too long into darkness and learned to see without comfort. They looked you up and down, lingering on your wrist. Turn around, they said. You hesitated. Ash nudged you. Do it, Ash whispered. You turned. The figure stepped close enough that you smelled them: smoke, sweat, oil. They were real in a way city people rarely were. They reached for your wrist again, and you flinched instinctively, but their hand was steady. They pressed 2 fingers to the bead. The bead pulsed, angry. A thin filament of light flickered in the air for a split second, searching, then vanished as if swallowed by the stone around you. The figure grunted. Muffled, they said, glancing at Ash. You did that? Ash nodded, jaw tight. Not enough. No, the figure agreed. Not enough. They stepped back and lifted the lantern, gesturing for you to follow. Move, they said. If you brought a cleaner to my door, you brought worse behind it. The corridor sloped downward. Your footsteps echoed. The echo startled you. In the city, sound was swallowed, softened. Here, sound traveled and came back to you, reminding you existed. You walked behind the hooded figure, Ash at your side. Ash's shoulder brushed yours occasionally, grounding you. The band on your wrist still pulsed, but the pulse felt muted here, as if the stone walls wrapped it in damp cloth. After a few turns, the corridor widened into a chamber lit by several lanterns. Shadows danced on the walls. The chamber held things you'd only seen in old recordings: shelves with jars of screws and bolts, coils of rope, stacks of worn cloth, tools with real edges. A low table with dented cups and a pot that smelled faintly of bitter herbs. In one corner, a small fire burned inside a metal ring, its flames licking up with hungry orange tongues. A fire, underground. Real heat, real light. You stared, mesmerized. On the far wall, a map was pinned, paper, not screen. Lines and scribbles marked tunnels, hatches, places labeled in handwriting that leaned sharp and hurried. The hooded figure set the lantern down and pulled back their hood. Their hair was gray and cut short. Their face was lined, not smoothed. Their mouth didn't know how to smile politely, and maybe didn't want to. They looked at you. Name, they demanded. You opened your mouth, then remembered Ash's warning. You glanced at Ash. Ash shook their head slightly. The gray-haired person's eyes narrowed. Still wired enough to fear your own tongue, they said, voice edged with contempt and pity at once. They leaned closer, eyes fixed on your band. Fine. Don't speak it. Point to yourself. Let me see what they gave you. You lifted a trembling finger and touched your chest. The gray-haired person grunted. Not helpful, they said. Then, softer, almost to themselves, they're getting lazy. Giving bands to fresh placements. They think comfort is unbreakable. Ash cleared their throat. We needed the door, Ash said. They were running a sweep. The gray-haired person's gaze snapped to Ash. I heard, they said. Stone carries sound. And your cleaner carries perfume. Your stomach clenched. Did it? You began, then stopped. You didn't know what to ask. Did it follow? Did it get stuck? Did it call others? As if answering, the gray-haired person moved to a small pipe opening in the wall and pressed their ear to it. They listened for a long moment, eyes closed, then they straightened. It's still outside, they said. Scraping at the door. Confused. Ash exhaled, a shaky release. Good. Not good, the gray-haired person corrected. Confused machines are loud machines. Loud machines call friends. Ash's face tightened. The gray-haired person turned back to you. Their eyes softened a fraction. You're lucky, they said. Not because you got out. That's not luck. That's curiosity, and it's dangerous. You're lucky because you found Ash before the band taught you to love your cage. Your throat tightened at the word love. You remembered how quickly the room's softness had tried to pull you back into floating. How easily you could have surrendered if you'd wanted to stop feeling sharp. Who are you? Ash asked, voice cautious. The gray-haired person's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but it didn't bloom. People down here call me Sable, they said. Not because I'm soft. Ash nodded slowly, as if filing the name away like a tool. Sable moved to a shelf and grabbed a small metal clamp with 2 prongs and a screw handle. They held it up to the lantern light, inspecting it. This, Sable said, is how you stop the band from singing. Ash's eyes widened. You can cut it? Sable's gaze sharpened. Cutting is messy, they said. The city feels sudden silence. It panics. It sends the world to look for the missing note. They stepped close to you again. No, Sable said. You don't cut. You lie. You make the band sing the wrong song. They crouched and took your wrist, positioning the clamp around the bead. The metal was cold enough to sting. Sable tightened the screw slowly. The bead pulsed hard, as if struggling. A faint, dizzy wave rolled through your head, like the band tried to push you down into sleep again. Your knees nearly buckled. Ash caught your elbow, steadying you. Breathe, Ash whispered. Hold on. Sable tightened the clamp another turn. The bead's pulse stuttered. A strange sensation blossomed behind your eyes, like a window opening in your skull. For a heartbeat, you heard something far away, the city's lullaby, the layered whispers, the gentle phrases designed to shape thought. But now, instead of washing over you smoothly, it snagged. It fractured. It sounded like a chorus of voices stumbling over their own words. Sable's eyes glittered with satisfaction. There, they murmured. Now it's speaking in static. It will report you as present, resting, compliant. You swallowed hard, throat dry. It will lie? Sable released your wrist. The clamp sat snug around the bead like a collar on a collar. The bead still pulsed, but faintly, muffled under the metal. It will do what it's told, Sable said. Just like most people. Ash's jaw clenched at that, but they didn't argue. Sable stepped back and studied you again, this time with a colder calculation. Now the question is, Sable said, why did you come down here? People don't fall through seams unless something inside them is already cracked. You didn't know how to answer without saying too much. Your thoughts felt slippery, half yours and half shaped by the city's training. You searched for something honest you could offer. I saw a door that didn't glow, you said finally. And I heard a voice that wasn't the loop. Sable's eyes narrowed. A voice, they repeated. Ash watched Sable closely. In the library, Ash added. A phrase. Not scheduled. Sable went still. For the first time, the hard certainty in their face faltered into something like concern. Not scheduled, Sable echoed, as if tasting the words. They turned abruptly and crossed to the paper map on the wall. Their finger traced along a line that led upward, toward a label written in sharp strokes. You couldn't read it from where you stood. Sable's voice dropped. If there's an unscheduled voice in the library, they said, then someone is bleeding through. Ash's brows knit. Bleeding through from where? Sable didn't answer. They reached under the table and pulled out an object wrapped in cloth. They unrolled it to reveal a device you'd never seen, part tool, part weapon. It had a handle and a head made of interlocking metal rings, etched with tiny symbols that seemed to shift when the firelight flickered. Sable held it up, eyes reflecting flame. From the place the city pretends doesn't exist, they said. Then, from the pipe in the wall, a new sound drifted in, faint but unmistakable. Not the cleaner's friendly chime. A deeper tone, layered with a soft chorus of voices, like a lullaby sung by a crowd. Ash's face drained of color. Sable's eyes went cold. They didn't send friends, Sable murmured. They sent a choir. And somewhere above, through stone and metal, the city began to sing your name without knowing it had the wrong mouth. Chapter 7, The choir in the walls. The sound wasn't loud, but it filled everything. It seeped through the stone the way dampness seeped, slow, patient, impossible to ignore once it had touched you. A chorus of soft voices braided together, not quite words, not quite melody, more like the shape of comfort turned into sound. It carried the city's familiar gentleness, But here in the underground chamber it felt wrong, like perfume sprayed over rot. Your skin prickled. The hairs on your arms lifted as if the song had fingers. Ash's hand tightened on your sleeve. You could feel Ash trembling, not with panic alone but with recognition, as if this sound belonged to a fear they'd been trying to keep buried. Sable strode to the pipe opening again and pressed their ear against it, eyes narrowed. The fire crackled behind you, small and brave. Its orange light flickered against the damp walls, casting Sable's profile into sharp shadow. Sable pulled back. Their face had gone still in a way that made you more afraid than if they'd shouted. It's not searching, Sable said quietly. It's settling. Ash swallowed. Settling where? In the routes, Sable replied. In the breathing tubes. In the seams. They're pouring it in, thick. They want the stone to hum. They want the tunnels to carry it. You looked at the map on the wall, at the hand-drawn lines like veins. You imagined the song flowing through those veins, turning the underground into a second orchard. No cradles, no glass, just rock made soft with sound. What happens if it settles? You asked, voice thin. Sable's gaze snapped to you. Then you'll start feeling the city again, they said. Right here. They tapped their own temple with 2 fingers. It will coat your thoughts. It will make this place feel like a mistake you're embarrassed by. Ash's jaw clenched. They can't push it through stone that well, Ash said, but the certainty sounded forced. Sable's mouth tightened. Stone isn't magic, they said. It's just stubborn. And stubborn things crack if you keep pressing. The choir grew slightly clearer, as if it had moved closer. A phrase emerged from the braid for a breath, soft, warm, coaxing. Rest. Your stomach twisted. Your eyelids fluttered, heavy for a moment. The underground chamber blurred at the edges, and the fire's flames seemed to smooth into something gentle, less hungry pain. You reminded yourself. You pressed your nails into your palm until a sting flared. The sting cut through the softness like a knife. Ash saw you do it and nodded once, grim approval. Sable moved fast now, a person turning from listening into doing. They grabbed cloth from a shelf and tossed a strip to Ash. Tie it, Sable ordered. Over your mouth and nose. Not tight. Just enough to remind your body the air is lying. Ash obeyed instantly, wrapping the cloth around their lower face. The gesture looked strange and fierce, like someone preparing for smoke. Sable tossed another strip to you. You fumbled with it, hands shaking. The cloth smelled like old sweat and oil, deeply human. You tied it over your mouth and nose. The fabric scratched your skin. The discomfort grounded you. Sable then reached into a dented tin box and pulled out small pellets wrapped in paper. They pressed one into Ash's hand, then one into yours. Chew, Sable said. Bitter is honest. You unwrapped the pellet and put it in your mouth. It tasted like crushed leaves and metal, so bitter your eyes watered. You gagged, then forced yourself to chew. The bitterness spread across your tongue, and the choir's sweetness became harder to swallow. Ash chewed too, face twisting. Sable grabbed the strange ring-headed device they'd unwrapped earlier and slung it over their shoulder with practiced ease. They moved to the far wall where a low hatch sat hidden behind stacked crates. With a grunt, Sable shoved the crates aside. The hatch was older than the others, its edges rusted, its handle worn. It looked like it belonged to a time before the city made everything smooth. Sable yanked it open. A draft rose from below, cold and damp, carrying the smell of earth, real earth, not the sanitized scent of gardens on screens. Down, Sable said. Ash moved first, dropping through with quick certainty. You followed, gripping the hatch edge. Your hand slipped slightly on the rust. You lowered yourself into the dark. As your feet found a ladder rung, the choir in the wall surged, as if noticing the movement. The sound thickened in your ears, trying to wrap around the bitterness on your tongue, trying to turn the scratch of cloth into comfort. The ladder descended into deeper darkness, lit only by occasional lantern hooks along the shaft. You climbed down carefully, muscles tight. The band on your wrist pulsed faintly under its clamp, like a muffled heartbeat. Halfway down, you heard something above, the scrape of metal on stone, not the cleaner's gentle drag but heavier, more deliberate. A vibration ran through the ladder. Ash froze below you, looking up. Sable's face appeared at the hatch opening, lit by the chamber's firelight. Their eyes were sharp. Move, Sable hissed. You climbed faster. Panic made your limbs clumsy. The ladder shook again, then a new sound, a soft clicking chorus, many little clicks overlapping, like joints folding, like limbs adjusting, not one cleaner. Many. Sable slammed the hatch closed above and spun a wheel lock. The metal groaned, protesting. The clicking continued above, then stopped abruptly, replaced by a low, harmonious hum. The hatch shuddered once, as if something had pressed against it, then again. Sable climbed down after you, moving with fierce speed. They're not breaking in, Sable muttered through clenched teeth. They're singing at it. Ash's eyes widened. Singing at a hatch? Sable nodded, grim. They can vibrate locks loose. They can make metal tired. The thought made you nauseous. Sound as a tool. Comfort as a crowbar. You climbed down into a lower tunnel and stepped off the ladder. The space here was narrower but steadier, carved through packed earth rather than cut stone. Roots hung from the ceiling like thin hair. Water dripped steadily, and the sound felt like a heartbeat that belonged to the ground. Sable jumped down last, landing lightly. They grabbed a lantern from a hook and lit it. The flame flared, flickered, then steadied. The light revealed a tunnel that stretched away, rough and uneven. The walls were lined with old pipes, some broken, some capped. In places, the earth had swallowed the metal, claiming it back. Ash leaned close to you, voice muffled by the cloth. Where are we going? Ash asked. Sable held the lantern high, scanning the tunnel ahead like a hunter. Away from the lungs, Sable said. Deeper, where their sweet air can't reach as easily. The city has lungs down here too, Ash argued. Sable's gaze flicked back. Not like above, Sable said. Down here, the air is older. It remembers being free. You didn't know if air could remember. But the smell here, damp soil, rust, smoke, felt like truth. The choir above faded slightly as you walked deeper, but it didn't vanish. It remained like a memory that wouldn't stop humming in your skull. You chewed the bitter pellet until your jaw ached. The taste coated your tongue, making you grimace with every breath. But it helped. The choir's sweetness slid off the bitterness, unable to cling as easily. The tunnel bent, and you saw something ahead that made you slow. A doorway cut into the earth, framed with rough beams. Beyond it, a room glowed with warm lantern light. You heard voices, human voices, low, urgent, layered with the sound of movement. Not synchronized laughter. Not rehearsed comfort. Real voices speaking over one another, arguing, asking, breathing. Sable stopped at the doorway and lifted a hand, signaling you and Ash to stay close. Their eyes sharpened with caution. Inside, the room was larger than you expected, carved out of earth and reinforced with beams and metal scraps. It looked like a nest made from the city's discarded bones. People stood around a table, their faces lit by lantern flame. Their clothes were mismatched, patched, worn. Their expressions were not smooth. Some looked up as Sable entered. Their eyes darted to you and Ash, then to your wrist. A murmur rose. Sable spoke first, voice cutting through the room like a blade. We have a tagged one, Sable said. Clamp and muffling in place. Choir is in the walls. At the words, the room's atmosphere changed. People stiffened. A woman with dark hair pulled tight stepped forward, eyes sharp. A man with broad shoulders and oil-stained hands cursed under his breath. The dark-haired woman's gaze locked on you. You brought the choir? She demanded, voice hard. You opened your mouth, but cloth and bitterness and fear tangled your words. Ash stepped forward, protective. They were tagged above, Ash said. We didn't choose it. The woman's eyes flicked to Ash. And who were you to speak for them? Ash hesitated, then said quietly, someone who didn't forget. A silence fell. Not comfortable. Heavy. In the silence, you felt the faint pulse of the band again, stubborn under the clamp. It was still trying. Still reporting. Still listening. Sable set the lantern down and faced the group. Argue later, Sable said. If the choir loosens that hatch, they'll flood the upper tunnels with sweet air and find the seams we use. We need to move the listening post. The oil-stained man slammed a fist on the table. Move it where? He snapped. There's nowhere left that isn't mapped by their breath. The dark-haired woman's eyes narrowed. There is, she said slowly, as if the words hurt to admit. The old place. A ripple of discomfort went through the room, like a collective flinch. A few people looked away. Someone muttered a prayer-like phrase under their breath, but it sounded more like fear than faith. Sable's face hardened. No, Sable said flatly, the choir is already here, the woman replied. If we stay in the known tunnels, they'll make the ground sing. The old place is the only place their lullaby doesn't fit. Sable's hand tightened on the ring-headed device slung over their shoulder. The old place eats people, Sable said, voice low. The woman stepped closer, eyes blazing. So does the city, she snapped, your stomach clenched. Old place. Eats people. Lullaby doesn't fit. A phrase stirred in your memory, the unscheduled voice in the library, the sound of someone trying to remember their own name. And Marrow's careful smile, like a curtain dropping. You took a step forward despite yourself. What is the old place? You asked, voice muffled and raw. Every head in the room turned toward you. The lantern light flickered, and in the brief dance of shadow, the faces around you looked like something the city had tried very hard to erase. Fear, anger, hope, hunger. The dark-haired woman studied you, then glanced at your wrist, then back to your eyes. It's where the city put the things it couldn't smooth, she said softly. And if you really heard an unscheduled voice in the library, she leaned in, her words sharp as a knife's edge, then the old place is knocking back. Chapter 8, The Map of Forgotten Corridors. The room held its breath after the woman's words, as if even the lantern flames were listening. The choir's hum was fainter down here, but it still brushed the edges of your hearing, like a hand trying the latch of your thoughts. The bitter taste in your mouth had begun to fade into a dull ache, and you feared what would happen when it disappeared completely. Sable moved first, breaking the stillness with the scrape of a chair across packed earth. Names, Sable said, looking at the gathered faces. Not for the tagged one. For the plan. The dark-haired woman lifted her chin. Vesper, she said. The oil-stained man grunted. Rook. A slender person with a shaved head and quick eyes said, Moth. Another, older and stooped, murmured, Brine. You watched, stunned by the variety. In the city, people were arranged like neat rows of fruit. Here, each face carried its own weather. Their names sounded like chosen things, not assigned labels. Ash stood close to you, shoulders tight. They'll hear us if we talk too much, Ash whispered. Vesper heard and gave a humorless half-smile. They always hear, she said. The trick is making sure they don't understand. She stepped to the table, where a paper map lay pinned beneath stones to keep it from curling. The map was a patchwork of pages taped together, some paper yellowed and brittle, some newer and smeared with fresh ink. It showed tunnels, hatches, shafts. Lines crossed and tangled like roots. Vesper traced a route with her finger. They're pouring song into the upper lungs, she said. If the hatch above Sable's chamber gives, cleaners will spill into the service veins. They'll crawl along every seam we've used in the last while. Sable's gaze flicked to Vesper sharply, as if warning her not to say too much, not to turn time into a measurable thing. Vesper didn't blink. Rook slammed a palm down on the map. We can collapse the hatch tunnel, he said. Bring down stone and bury the choir's mouth. Moth shook their head. Collapse it and you collapse our escape routes too, they said, voice quick. And you make noise. Real noise. The city loves excuses to send more. Brine, stooped and quiet, lifted a finger and pointed to a section of the map marked with shaky lines and scribbled warnings. There, Brine whispered. The forgotten corridors. The city doesn't keep them polished. It doesn't like what's down there. Your eyes followed Brine's finger. The ink in that section looked different, darker, as if written by someone pressing hard enough to tear the page. A label sat over the lines, written in slanted, angry strokes. You couldn't read the exact words from where you stood, but you felt the meaning in the way everyone's bodies shifted, shoulders tensing, jaws tightening, eyes flicking away. Sable's mouth flattened. The old place, Sable said, as if naming it made it more real. Vesper nodded. We moved the listening post there, she said. We shelter the tagged one there until the sweep passes. Rook snorted. Shelter, he said. You call that shelter? That place eats people, Sable said so. It eats the ones who go in pretending they can stay the same, Vesper replied, voice hard. We aren't staying the same anyway. Sable's hand went to the ring-headed device slung over their shoulder. They didn't touch it like a weapon. They touched it like a burden. Ash leaned closer to you, whispering. They're scared, Ash said. That's how you know it's real. You tried to swallow, but the cloth at your mouth made the motion awkward. The band's clamp felt heavier now, as if your wrist was wearing an extra bone. Vesper looked at you again. Her gaze was sharp, but not cruel. You, she said, pointing at your wrist. Do you still feel it? You nodded, then hesitated, then spoke carefully through the cloth. It pulses, you said. But it's muffled. Like it's underwater. Sable nodded once, approving. Good enough for movement, Sable said. Not good enough for rest. Moth lifted their chin toward your face. They can still push sleep, they said. If they find a clean signal line, they can flood the band with comfort until you fold. Your stomach clenched. You remembered the wave of heaviness in the crawlspace, the invitation to float. It had felt so easy to accept. Vesper's eyes hardened. Then we don't let them find a clean line, she said. She looked at Sable. We use the old place because their lullaby doesn't fit there. The walls don't carry song the way stone does. The air doesn't behave. Brian murmured, almost reverent. The air bites. Rook grimaced. Lovely. Sable exhaled slowly, then turned to a shelf and grabbed a bundle of cloth and a small tin of black paste. They began smearing the paste in lines along the cloth strips, working fast. What's that? You asked. Smoke binder, Sable said without looking up. A dull scent. Machines track perfume trails. Will smell like soot. Sable tossed a strip to Ash, then to you, then to Vesper. Wrap wrists and neck, Sable ordered. Any place the band's warmth might leak. You wrapped the strip around your wrist, over the clamp, sticky black paste staining your fingers. It smelled sharp, like burnt resin. It made your eyes water, but it also made you feel less clean, less readable. Vesper rolled up the map with brisk efficiency and tied it with a cord. We go in small, she said. Sable leads. Brian knows the turns. Moth watches the rear. Rook carries weight. Ash stays with the tagged one. Ash stiffened beside you, and you felt a flicker of gratitude and fear. Ash had chosen to stand near you, and in this underground world, choice seemed costly. Rook grunted and began loading a pack with tools and tins. Moth checked a small device made of wire and glass that looked like a listening ear. Brian lit another lantern. The room filled with movement and urgency. As they prepared, you stood near the fire and stared into its flickering mouth. The flames didn't soothe. They demanded attention. They made shadows that danced like living things. You realized you'd never truly watched fire before. In the city, heat came from silent vents. Light came from panels that never flickered. Here, every comfort came with risk. Sable stepped to you and lowered their voice. Listen, Sable said, eyes locked on yours. The old place isn't a tunnel. It's a bruise. The city built around it and tried to forget it, but it's still tender. Don't touch what you don't understand. Don't chase voices. A chill ran through you. Voices, you repeated. Sable's gaze flicked to your wrist. You already chase voices, Sable said bluntly. That's why you're here. Ash shifted uncomfortably. They heard an unscheduled phrase, Ash said quietly, as if defending you. That matters. Sable's expression tightened. It matters too much, Sable said. Unscheduled phrases mean a leak. A leak means pressure. Pressure means the city will squeeze until something pops. Vesper called from the doorway. Move. You followed Ash, Sable, and the others into the tunnel beyond the chamber. The air grew colder as you went, and the lantern light threw the tunnel walls into sharp relief. Roots brushed your shoulders like damp fingers. Somewhere ahead, water ran in a thin stream, whispering over stone. As you walked, you noticed marks on the walls, scratches, painted symbols, small carved notches. Signs left by people who didn't want to be found. The city's world was all glowing labels. This world was coated in scars. Brian walked near the front, counting turns under their breath in a rhythm that was almost soothing. Not a lullaby. A survival chant. The choir's hum faded further with each step, but it never fully left your ears. It lingered like a memory of sweetness, like the ghost of a drug. The tunnel narrowed, then widened, then narrowed again. At one point you passed a rusted grate where cold air blew up from below, carrying the smell of wet stone and something sharp, almost like vinegar. The air bit at your nose. Brian was right. After a long wall of winding routes, Sable stopped in front of a wall that looked like nothing, just packed earth reinforced with beams. Sable lifted the lantern and examined a spot where the beam met the ground. Then Sable knelt and pressed fingers into a small crack. The crack widened. A hidden door swung inward with a reluctant creak, releasing a gust of air that smelled wrong. Not rotten, not sweet, wrong in a way your body understood before your mind did. It smelled like a place that didn't belong to the city's tidy world. Like dust that had never been cleaned. Like metal that had never been polished. Like breath that had never been filtered. Vesper stepped close, lantern held high. The light revealed a corridor beyond, lined with old tiles, cracked and stained, their surfaces dull. Faint writing covered some of the walls, scrawled in different hands, overlapping, frantic. Your skin crawled. The corridor looked like it had once been part of the city's polished belly, then abandoned and left to fester in silence. Sable's voice dropped. This is the seam the city stitched over, Sable said. The air in the corridor shimmered faintly, as if heat and cold were arguing. Ash's fingers brushed your elbow, steadying you. This is it, Ash whispered. The old place. You took one step forward, and the band on your wrist pulsed sharply, stronger than it had in the tunnels, like it had tasted a clean signal again. The clamp vibrated. Moth swore softly. It's reacting, they said. Sable's eyes narrowed. Of course it is, Sable muttered. The old place doesn't smother signal. It twists it. Vesper raised her lantern and peered down the corridor. In the flickering light, the scrawled words on the walls seemed to shift, not because they moved, but because your eyes couldn't settle on them. Some were scratched deep, some smeared like someone had written with dirty fingers. You leaned closer to one line of writing without thinking. The letters were crude, uneven, but they formed a word you recognized from old lessons, an archaic concept the city treated like a joke. Freedom. As you stared, the letters seemed to darken, and for a heartbeat you heard a whisper that didn't come from vents or pipes. It came from the wall itself, as if the corridor remembered voices the city had tried to erase, and the whisper spoke not in the city's soft command, but in a tone raw with longing. Come closer, it breathed. The corridor wanted you, not in the way the city wanted you, with soft hands and sugared air. This wanting was older, rougher, like the pull of a river when you step too near its edge. The lantern light from Vesper's hand wavered, and the scrawls on the wall seemed to lean toward the flame, as if starving for it. Don't, Sable snapped, catching the angle of your body before you moved any closer. Their palm landed on your shoulder, heavy and real. The touch broke the spell just enough for you to blink, for the letters to become only letters again. But the whisper didn't stop. It slid around the edges of the group like fog. Come closer. Rook shifted his weight, jaw clenched. Moth's eyes darted, tracking shadows that weren't supposed to move. Brian's lips trembled in a silent rhythm, as if praying to the turns they'd memorized. Vesper raised the lantern higher. We don't follow, she said, more to the corridor than to you. Her voice cut cleanly through the hush. We pass through. Sable nodded once. Stay tight, Sable ordered. No one touches the walls. No one reads. No one listens alone. Ash stepped closer to you until your shoulders almost touched. Through the cloth at their mouth, their breath was warm and fast. Keep biting the bitter, Ash murmured. Keep feeling your feet. You nodded and swallowed the last sharp ghosts of the pellet. Though your tongue felt bruised from the taste, you moved forward. The old place opened like a throat. Tiles underfoot were slick in spots, and cracked in others, the seams filled with black grime. The air shimmered faintly, not with heat exactly, but with something like disagreement, as if the space couldn't decide whether it was a corridor or a memory. The scrawled words along the walls became denser. Some were scratched so deep the tile looked wounded. Others were smeared, as if written by hands that had slipped in panic. The lantern light made the ink shine wetly, even when it was clearly dry. Your wrist pulsed beneath the clamp. The bead fought, a tiny trapped heart. The clamp rattled softly, a nervous insect sound. Then the choir returned, not the full sweetness of the city's lullaby, but a distant echo, filtering in from somewhere above. The sound found the old corridor and changed. It broke apart. The gentle harmony splintered into uneven notes that scraped against the tiles. The comfort phrases stretched, warped, and came back wrong. Rest became rust. Belong became bledlong. Good became something else entirely, a cracked syllable that didn't land. The city's song didn't fit here. Sable halted abruptly, lifting a fist. Everyone froze. Ahead, the corridor widened into a chamber where the ceiling rose and vanished into darkness. In the center sat a structure that made your lungs tighten, a ring of metal frames, like the ribs of a dome, half collapsed and overgrown with hanging cables and strips of old insulation. The cable swayed slightly, though there was no wind. At the base of the structure was a door, one of the same dark, riveted kind you'd seen in the deeper tunnels, but smaller. This one had no wheel. It had a hand-shaped plate, worn smooth by touch. The air around it felt thick, like breath held too long. Vesper stepped forward, lantern lifted. "This is where the listening post used to be," she said, voice quiet. "Used to be," you whispered. Moth gave you a sharp look. Before it started listening back, they said. The phrase made your skin crawl. Your own room had listened back. The corridor had whispered. How many mouths did the city have, and how many mouths had the old place grown? In answer, Sable moved to the metal rib structure and ran a hand along one of the frames. Their fingers came away black. "They sealed this section for a reason," Sable murmured. "The city doesn't abandon useful space unless it's afraid of what it might do." Ash's eyes were fixed on your wrist. "The band's getting louder," Ash said. "You felt it too." The bead pulsed with a new insistence, as if it had found a clearer path. Not upward, sideways. Into the old place itself. The clamp vibrated, and the smoke-binder cloth warmed, sticky against your skin. Sable lifted their ring-headed device from their shoulder and held it out. Up close you could see the etched symbols shimmering as the lantern flame danced. The rings began to rotate, slowly, without being touched, as if the device was sensing something in the air. Vesper's voice dropped. "If the city's choir is in the walls," she said, "and the old place twists song," Rook finished for her, grim, "then this chamber will twist it too." A soft chime echoed faintly from behind, not from the walls. From the corridor you'd come through. You all turned. At the far end, the darkness had gained a pale glow. A cleaner slit eye, searching, patient. But it wasn't alone. Several other glows bobbed behind it like a cluster of polite stars. The choir had found the seam. Moth backed up, eyes wide. "They're here." Sable's jaw tightened. "Of course," Sable said. "They don't need to understand the old place to flood it. They just need to keep coming until the pressure wins." The cleaners slid closer, their limbs clicking softly, their perfume sweetness crawling ahead of them like a fog. The fog hit the chamber and shivered, as if confused by the air. For a heartbeat, it recoiled, then it adapted, thinning into a mist that carried both sweetness and something sharp, like burnt sugar. Your eyelids fluttered. The old invitation to float rose in you. Ash grabbed your forearm, nails pressing hard. "Stay," Ash whispered. "Stay awake." Sable lifted the ring-headed device. The rotating ring sped up, whirring softly, and the etched symbols began to glow faintly, as if heated from within. Sable's face became fierce in the lantern light. "What is that?" you asked, voice shaking. "A fork," Sable said. "Not for food. For song." Sable planted the device's head against the metal ribs of the structure. The moment it touched, the ribs vibrated. A low note rose, deep and ugly, nothing like the city's lullaby. It was the sound of something waking unwillingly. The cleaners paused. Their slit eyes narrowed, as if the note had disrupted their reading. Sable pushed harder. The ring spun faster, and the low note grew into a tremor you felt in your teeth. The chamber's air shimmered violently, as if reality itself were being stirred. Vesper stepped close, voice raised over the vibration. "If we can make the old place sing louder than the choir," she shouted, "we can drown their comfort. We can break their pattern." Rook stared at the approaching glows. "And if we can't?" Sable didn't look back. "Then they reset us," Sable said. "Or we tear ourselves free trying." The vibration climbed. The scrawled words on the wall began to shake, dust falling from the deep scratches. The whisper you'd heard, "Come closer," returned, but now it sounded different. Not inviting. Not coaxing, excited. The cleaners slid forward again, faster, their limbs unfolding with purpose. The lead one chimed, and the chime tried to be gentle, tried to be soothing. But the fork's low note twisted at midair. The chime bent into a warped cry, your band pulsed hard, and suddenly the bead's warmth flared, hot enough to sting. The clamp rattled violently. The city was pushing. You felt a wave swell inside your skull, softness, heaviness, a lush promise of relief. Your knees weakened. The lantern light blurred. The fire smell of the underground seemed far away. In the middle of that wave, another sound cut through. A voice, raw and unscheduled, rising from the scrawled wall itself, no longer a whisper, but a shout that came from deep inside the tiles, as if a trapped throat had found air. No. The single word cracked the wave like glass. Your eyes snapped clear. You stumbled, catching yourself on Ash's shoulder. The wall voice continued, hoarse with effort. "No, no, no." The fork's note surged in answer. The chamber shook. The metal ribs thrummed like a giant instrument, and the cleaners, polite, patient, began to jitter, their limbs stuttering as their systems tried to smooth what could not be smoothed. Sable's teeth were bared in a grimace that was almost a smile. "There you are," Sable snarled, not to the cleaners, but to the chamber itself. "Sing." The old place sang back, and for the first time you understood, it wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was crowded with voices the city had tried to press flat. The choir from above pushed harder, flooding down through pipes and seams, trying to cover the uprising with sweetness. But the sweetness hit the old place and curdled the air bit. The cleaners slid forward, then faltered, then began to retreat as their own gentle commands warped into something they could not obey. In the chaos of vibrating metal and shouting walls, your wrist burned. The band pulsed like a frantic animal, and the clamp screw began to loosen from the force, turning by itself in tiny jerks. Ash saw it and swore. "It's coming off," Ash gasped. The clamp, Sable's eyes flicked to you for a split second, and in that look you saw a decision land like a knife. "Good," Sable said. Then Sable yanked the fork free from the ribs and swung it toward you. Before you could understand, Sable slammed the rotating rings against your wrist, right over the bead. Pain exploded up your arm, bright and clean. The world flashed white. The bead screamed, not with sound, but with sensation, like a nerve being plucked. You cried out behind your cloth, body folding, and in that moment of blinding pain, you felt something else tear. The thin thread snapping. A leash breaking. The choir's hum in your head went silent for a heartbeat. In that silence, you heard your own breath again, ragged, real, yours. Then the bead cracked. Not visibly, not like glass shattering, but like a shell splitting. Heat poured out, then vanished, and the pulse stopped. The band went dead. The cleaners, sensing the severed signal, froze as if someone had cut their strings. Their slit eyes flared, then dimmed. Their limbs twitched uncertainly. Sable grabbed you by the collar and hauled you upright. Their eyes were wild. "Run," Sable shouted. "Now, while they don't know what to be." Vesper pointed at the small door at the base of the ribs. "In there." Ash pulled you toward it, half dragging as your arm throbbed. You stumbled, dizzy, wrist numb and burning. Behind you, the choir surged again, desperate, trying to reclaim the note it had lost. The cleaners began to chime in overlapping confusion, their polite sounds collapsing into frantic noise. Ash shoved the handplate door. It resisted, then gave, swinging inward into darkness. Cold air rushed out, so sharp it made you gasp. You crossed the threshold, and the old place's singing fell away behind you like a curtain. Inside, darkness swallowed the lantern light, and something in the dark whispered your name, not as a command, but as recognition, as if it had been waiting for you to arrive without a leash. Chapter 12. The first breath that wasn't given the dark room beyond the handplate door wasn't a room at all. It was a hollow carved out beneath the city like a hidden lung, and it breathed differently than anything you'd ever known. The air was cold and thin and sharp enough to sting the inside of your nose. It didn't smell like sweetness. It didn't smell like designed comfort. It smelled like stone and damp and smoke and something faintly green, like life trying to grow without permission. Ash stumbled in with you, then Vesper, then Sable, then the others, moving fast. The door swung partly shut behind you, leaving a crack through which you could still hear the chaos, warped chimes, distant humming, the old place's deep vibration fading as you left its ribs behind. Sable pressed a palm to the door's edge, pushing it closed. It shut with a heavy thud that felt final, like the end of a chapter the city didn't want written. For a moment, there was only darkness and breathing. Then Vesper's lantern flared, and the light revealed a space that stole your breath. The ceiling rose high, rough stone arching overhead, hung with long roots that dangled like the hair of some sleeping giant. Water dripped from them in slow, steady drops that hit the floor with soft plinks. The floor was uneven, dotted with shallow pools that reflected lantern light in trembling shards. Along the far wall, old metal panels had been bolted into place, forming a patchwork barrier. Some panels bore faded symbols from the city, warnings, instructions, scratched over by other writing, newer, angrier. Between panels were narrow gaps where cold air streamed in from deeper cracks in the earth, and in the center of the space stood a machine. Not a cleaner. Not a tuning board. Not a polite screen. This machine was big, blocky, and old. Its surface was scarred and stained. Coils of thick wire ran from it into the stone like roots seeking water. A cluster of glass tubes rose from its top, some clouded, some clear, all empty. A handle protruded from one side, worn smooth by many hands. The machine looked like it had been built before the city learned to hide its teeth. Brian shuffled forward, lantern held low. Their face looked strange in the flickering light, tender, almost reverent. The old engine, Brian murmured. Rook let out a low whistle. So it's real, he said, voice rough. Moth circled the machine carefully, eyes wide. It's still connected, they whispered, tracing the wires with their gaze. How is it still connected? Sable didn't answer. Sable was staring at your wrist. Ash was too. Everyone was. Now that the band's pulse had stopped and the clamp sat useless against dead metal, you lowered your arm slowly. The skin around the band was red, and your whole forearm throbbed. The bead looked dull, its glossy depth gone, as if it had become a simple lump of black stone. Sable stepped close and, with a quick twist, loosened the clamp's screw. The clamp fell away. Sable slid the band off your wrist with a careful pull. It came off so easily. Now, you stared at the pale ring in Sable's hand. Such a small thing. Such a quiet weapon. Ash exhaled a sound that might have been laughter if it hadn't carried tears. You're free of it, Ash whispered. Free. The word landed in your chest like a weight and a light at once. It didn't feel like joy. It didn't feel like comfort. It felt like standing on the edge of something vast without a railing. Vesper touched your unbanded wrist gently, then let go as if afraid to claim you. Can you still hear the choir? She asked. You closed your eyes. You listened. The city was still there, somewhere above, humming, breathing, singing its soft commands into vents and walls. But in your head, inside your skull, it was quieter. Not gone, but distant, like a song from another room with a closed door between. You shook your head slowly. Not like before, you said, voice hoarse. It's far. Sable nodded once, grim satisfaction. Good, Sable said. Now your thoughts are yours enough to hurt you. Rook snorted. Always cheery, Sable. Sable's mouth twitched, almost amused, then turned serious again. We don't have long, Sable said. When they realize the band went dead, they'll stop pretending it's a nap. They'll mark it as a rupture. Moth swallowed. And they'll trace where the rupture happened. Vesper lifted her lantern toward the patched wall panels. Can they reach this place? She asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer she feared. Sable's eyes slid to the gaps between panels where cold air streamed in. Not easily, Sable said. Their machines hate rough air. Their comfort doesn't stick to it. But they can still come. They can still push. They can still seal routes and starve us. Ash's shoulders tightened. Then why keep this engine? Ash asked, gesturing toward the old machine. Why not run, scatter, disappear? Brian's eyes shone in the lantern light. Because this engine remembers, Brian whispered. Sable crossed to the machine and placed a hand on its scarred metal surface. The gesture looked oddly intimate, like touching the chest of a sleeping animal. This is older than their lullaby, Sable said. It was built for a world where people didn't need to be asleep to behave. It can do something the city hates. Vesper's gaze narrowed. Say it. Sable looked at each of you in turn, then at you last. It can send words upward, Sable said. Not soft loops. Not comfort. Real words. Unscheduled words. Words that don't fit. Your mouth went dry. You thought of the library, of the helmets whispering phrases into sleeping minds. You can speak into the city, you whispered. Sable nodded once. We can try, Sable said. We've tried before. It never lasts. The city adapts. It smooths the spike. It wraps the truth in sweetness until it tastes like dessert. Vesper stepped closer to the engine, lantern held high. Then we don't send truth like a spike, Vesper said, voice hard with sudden clarity. We send it like a seed. Ash turned to you, eye searching your face. You heard the unscheduled voice, Ash said. It broke through. That means someone up there still has cracks. You remembered the feeling in the library, that single phrase rising above the loops like a drowning person's hand. Someone trying to remember their own name. Someone slipping through the city's net. Yes, you whispered. There was a voice. Sable's gaze sharpened. Not just any voice, Sable said. A voice inside their most controlled room. That shouldn't happen unless something is wrong. Rook crossed his arms. Or unless someone is doing it on purpose, he growled. A hush fell. The thought spread through the group like cold water. Someone inside the city. Someone with access. Someone who knew the loops well enough to bend them. You thought of Marrow, his almost smile, his careful shift in tone, the way he'd looked at the ceiling vents before speaking. You thought of the band he'd called a gift. You thought of the click in the orchard, the dark door, the seam of light. Your chest tightened. Marrow, you said, and the name came out like a bruise. Sable's eyes went flat. Yes, Sable said. Marrow. Vesper's jaw clenched. If he tagged you, Vesper said, and you still found the seam, then either he's careless, or he wanted you to. Moth finished, voice small. The engine creaked softly, settling, as if it had heard its name spoken in a room where names mattered. Sable moved to the handle on the engine's side. Their fingers curled around it, knuckles whitening. We can send a pulse, Sable said. A burst of unscheduled words. Just a taste. Enough to wake a few minds without triggering a full clampdown. Brian nodded eagerly. A whisper in the right ear, Brian murmured. Rook looked sick. Or a scream that brings the whole city down on us. Vesper's gaze held steady. We're already in their throat, she said. They've been swallowing us for as long as we've been alive. Ash turned to you. In the lantern light, Ash's eyes looked brighter than before, almost fierce. It has to be your voice, Ash said. You stared. Mine? Ash nodded. They already heard you, Ash said. The band carried your rhythm. The city knows your shape. If you speak into them, it will slip through places they expect. They'll think it's one of their own thoughts. A chill ran through you. The idea of your voice inside other people's minds felt intimate and terrifying. But you also remembered how the city's phrases had lived in your head without asking. If the city could plant comfort, why couldn't you plant a question? Sable's hand stayed on the handle, waiting. If you do this, Sable said quietly, you don't get to be clean again. Not ever. You'll be a crack. They'll feel you. Vesper stepped close, lantern light cutting sharp shadows under her cheekbones. What did the wall say? She asked you, voice low. The voice that broke the lullaby. What did it choose? You swallowed. Your wrist throbbed. The cloth at your mouth felt like a barrier you suddenly hated. It said no, you whispered. Vesper nodded once. Then say no again, she said. But say it like a door. Ash reached up and tugged the cloth from their mouth, letting it fall around their neck. Their lips looked raw from the bitter and the strain. We'll hold you, Ash whispered. If it hits back, we'll hold you. You stepped toward the engine. Your feet splashed lightly in a shallow pool, and the sound echoed under the stone arch. Sable watched you approach with the focus of someone handing a blade to a person who had never held one. You reached the machine. Its metal surface was cold. The handle looked heavy. Sable stepped aside, giving you the place. You wrapped your fingers around the handle. It vibrated faintly under your touch, as if it recognized a new hand. As if it was hungry, you closed your eyes and searched for words that weren't loops, weren't rehearsed, weren't soft commands. Words that could live in someone's mind without becoming a leash. In the darkness behind your eyelids, you saw the orchard, rows of sleeping faces, peaceful mouths shaped into easy smiles. You saw the helmets whispering phrases into dreaming ears. You saw your own room's ceiling stars and the voice telling you to stay. And you saw the dark door in the library, the seam of light, the feeling of something awake behind it. You took a breath. A real breath that burned slightly in your throat. A breath not given by vents, not perfumed, not timed. You spoke into the old engine, voice low but steady. Wake up, you said. Just for one breath. If you feel too good, ask who chose it for you. Sable's hand joined yours on the handle. Together, you pulled. The engine groaned like a waking giant. The glass tubes on its top shivered, then began to glow faintly with a pale, unfamiliar light. The wires in the stone thrummed. A pulse rose from deep under the city, not a lullaby, not a choir, something rough and alive, like a heartbeat in the earth. And far above, unseen, the city's sweet air hesitated for the first time, as if it had tasted a word it couldn't smooth. In the silence that followed the pulse, you heard something that made your blood go cold and hot at once, a distant, startled laugh, human, unsynchronized, echoing faintly down through the cracks, as if someone up there had just opened their eyes in the middle of a dream. Then, immediately after, a new sound rolled through the stone like thunder wrapped in velvet, the city answering back, not with chimes or perfume, but with a deep, tightening hush, as if every vent had drawn in breath at once. Sable's eyes snapped open, wide with alarm. They felt it, Sable whispered, and somewhere above, the choir began again, this time not singing comfort, but hunting for the source of the unscheduled words. Before you go, what story should we step into next? Atomic Habits, The Power of Now, or The Alchemist? Tell me your pick in the comments, and if you want more immersive audiobook-style mindset stories, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter on Momentum Mind.